getting a little heavy here. In one of my interviews with Grandma said she was disappointed with how you did in school. And I responded with, "But Barry is your only child to go to 4-year college. I don't understand why are you so hard on it?" So you wanna address that?
Again, not a good student. Didn't apply myself. Didn't work very hard. Wasn't very good at it. So, and like I said, certainly not their fault. I was the one that didn't do the work and didn't put in and didn't all that kind of stuff. But didn't sound like they oversaw my homework the way they oversaw your homework. That kind of stuff. I was more interested in the sports and this and the socializing or anything but schoolwork. Just.
Like even
Unfortunately, Avery suffered from that because I made sure he had good grades. But
even in college, he played football.
All right.
yeah, I don't know if there's much more to it other than I think when I don't know when your father's 70 years old and she was in her 50s and they've already raised 3 kids. At some point, you go, I've done enough.
Well, when did you start liking history? Like, you like history now. You more than like it. You know a lot. When did it happen?
I always liked history, but I didn't like studying.
Mm.
Yeah, like I said, just wasn't a good student. I was, I wasn't able to get into any of the state schools. My grades weren't good enough. So I went to school in Ohio. I failed plenty. I used to do stupid stuff like I would fail trig, but because I hated the teacher, and then I would study the Barron's book and pass the Regents, so I would have to pass the class, you know. So I do stupid stuff like that.
So what was it like when you, how did your parents react when you told them that you got into school in Ohio?
They didn't want me to go, but I told them I was going anyway, so it wasn't, it was the only way for me to do anything that I wanted was to just say, well, I'm doing it anyway, whether you support me or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of those instances. I certainly did not go with their blessing. I've told Avery this story 100 times. When so I packed up my stuff to go to Ohio, and I had a couple of duffel bags of my clothes and a blanket and a pillow and all this kind of stuff, and it was like left the front door, said goodbye, hopped on the A train to Port Authority bus terminal, caught the bus to the airport and flew. You know, it wasn't like bye, see you. It was just like.
Well, where did you get the money from?
I worked.
And you paid for college yourself, or did they help you?
They actually did put money towards it, but initially no.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't care, you know, I'm doing it anyway. But it was that way through. It wasn't a new revel.
Everything you wanted to do was a fight, was an argument, was days or weeks of going over the same thing over and over and over, and then if you stuck to it long enough, eventually they would let you.
So I remember wanting to get a pair of sneakers that cost $12, and that took forever. So I started working at a really young age, maybe like 12 years old, and I started working because again I was playing sports, but I only had dress socks, so I wanted white socks. I wanted tube socks, and they refused to get me tube socks. They said, "You have socks; they're fine. You could play in those." And so I started to work at 12 years old so I could buy tube socks. That was the
American dream.
Yeah.
What jobs did you have?
I unloaded jelly jars off of a truck. I worked at a local hardware store. I worked at Yankee Stadium for 10 years. Camp counselor. I worked for a photographer. So the photographer would take pictures of road races, and I would have a magnifying glass, and I would have to identify the number on the person's bibs so that we could sell them the photos that he took, and all kinds of crap like that.
I don't even think I knew about some of these jobs you had.
What were you doing?
What was I doing?
She was out of the house by that. Like I said, when I was, again, understand that when I was 13, you were 21.
Yeah.
So.
I did babysitting. I did a lot of babysitting.
Although your dad has one of my favorite stories that involves me, though.
Our dad?
Yeah.
Oh, what is it?
Your dad gives me credit for your mom and him being together.
Oh,
Yes.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to tell it?
You tell it.
No, you tell it. It'd be better. It'd be better coming from you.
So, we lived in Washington Heights, and Steve lived in Brooklyn, and I knew nothing about Brooklyn. And he would come from Brooklyn to us, which, as you know, is like a 2-hour trip. And we were going out for a while, and the first time he came to Washington Heights, he felt like he was in this whole other area, because I was trying to describe to him, when you come out of the A train, how to get to where we lived on Broadway. In order to do that, you had to go around that whole big block with that building.
Right.
So,
Defendant Avenue.
so as I was trying to explain it to him, and because there was no such thing as, looking it up on a cell phone or anything. But, and I said, there will be plenty of people. You can ask them how to get to Broadway. And he did. And he managed to find us the first time. And he came, and it was awkward. He felt awkward, I guess, first date or what have you. But I took him to Riverdale. We went to see a movie there. We saw My Favorite Year. And we went to a pizza place there, and that was our first date ever together. And that was after I had met him at motor vehicle, and we didn't see each other for like 2 months, but we talked to each other on the phone, because weekends I had different things that I was doing. We had me and my friend Sue had planned vacation, and I had to watch Ruth's kids. Anyway, this is not going to what he's getting to. So, because his trips were so long, in the wintertime, we had a really, really bad snowstorm. And so one of the dates was, I didn't think he was going to come because they said there was no train service. But he went to the F line, which was above Brand, so he was able to come. And we went to the park, and we sat in the snow, and
That's the dry cold
that's
pictures.
the dry cold
Yeah,
picture.
okay.
But what he's talking about was because one of our dates, he went home late and got mugged on the way home. And then so I was feeling like maybe this isn't a good idea for him to come traveling all the time and what have you. And I was thinking of maybe, not dating him. And so Barry said, well, if he wants to come, if he wants to travel and come to you, then what's the big deal? Let him. So, that's what ended up happening. And, well, this is where we are.
I believe the way Dad tells it is.
He tells it
Barry,
better.
Barry says, if the bum wants to come and see you, let the bum come and see you.
Yeah, he says that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how old were you when you got married?
I was 26.
Yeah, so when you were dating, that would have put me like around 14, 15 or whatever.
All right.
But yeah, to answer your question, if you wanted anything that deviated from the sensibilities of our mother and father, you had to really put up quite a stink,
Yeah.
or just say screw it and do it on your own.